Hello, and welcome back to Enigma Sightings. My name is Alejandro Rojas. I'll be your host. I am the head of content and research at Enigma Labs, where we're developing an app and a place online where people can report their sightings, their UAP sightings, and then that data is collected into a database that is optimized for researchers to be able to pull data from that and do some research so we can figure out what's going on with this UAP phenomena. So in this show, we are focusing on sightings specifically. Last week, we had on researcher Ben Hansen to talk about a bunch of pilot reports that he's been getting lately due to one of the reports he got going viral. All of these reports led to some discoveries, including that many of them were Starlink satellites, which just look strange and something that pilots hadn't encountered in the skies. But there were also sightings that were more mysterious that he ran across. Well, we've got Ben back, and this time we're going to focus on the difficulties pilots have in reporting. Hello, Ben.
How's it going? How you doing?
Good. Doing great. Thanks for coming back on the show. So one of the things that was kind of exciting last time was that, the Starlink phenomena that you were able to discover with working with these pilots and these pilot reports is something novel. It's something new, and it's something that any official agencies have not really explored yet. So it's just UAP researchers like you that are even aware of this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating because we're still hearing a lot of reports, and I'm still accepting people, pilots, to send me their videos and things. And most of them are looking pretty similar to what we believe as Starlink. But what's frustrating is that there has not been any official word. There's not been any of these pilots been contacted, to my knowledge, from the FAA or other agencies trying to get more information. There's no official statements. SpaceX themselves, if it is Starlink, they have not responded to media, to ourselves, or to anything. So it's like, if this really is a new thing that we need to be aware of, then the pilots and the air traffic controllers really should be informed of it, and that's just not happening.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to do to kind of start off this conversation was, of course, you've ran across a lot of issues that you've outlined and that we'll be discussing that pilots have that are hurdles to them reporting. But in 2006, there was an event in November 7th in Chicago O'Hare, where the Chicago Tribune covered UAP sighting. And what's great about this event is that they discovered a lot of similar things that us researchers have. So let's take a look at this video.
Believe it or not, UFOs have been spotted over O'Hare. Chicago Tribune transportation writer John Hilkovich joining us from the Tribune Tower with more on this exclusive story now. And John, these are credible professionals that saw what they saw back in November, correct?
Yeah, they sure are, Jim. About a dozen of them, from ramp workers, maintenance workers, even pilots, on November 7th saw this disc-shaped object floating above the C concourse of United Airlines at O'Hare. Very low in the sky. It was still daylight, very distinct. Didn't look like an airplane, a helicopter, or anything else they've seen, and they have reported this both to their airline and to the FAA.
And these career professionals are telling you, John, that they in no way would they ever play games that could affect the lives of some hundreds of thousands of people that fly through O'Hare. This is really they're very determined and convinced they saw what they saw. Correct?
Oh, they're completely serious about this, and they want to get to the bottom of it. And they're concerned that whatever it was, even if it was some kind of military craft or something else, that it be identified, because it could pose a safety hazard. They went on the record with their airline and the FAA, giving their names, and certainly they were not hoaxing anybody. They just want to get an explanation, if at all possible.
So what did the FAA say?
Well, the FAA at first denied it when I called them, saying, we don't know what you're talking about. I put in a Freedom of Information request, and then when the FAA went through communications tapes, they called me back and said, well, yes, actually, there was quite a bit of radio talk, and a United Airlines supervisor did call the O'Hare Tower and inquire if controllers had seen anything out of the ordinary up there. So the FAA is acknowledging that United Airlines did contact them about this, although officially United says they've checked their logs and talked to their people, and they don't know anything about this.
Incredible. Nice work, John, once again, in the articles in today's Trip.
Thank you.
All right, so there you go. What's interesting about that, of course, is that the researcher, the investigator, the reporter, was told by the FAA they didn't know anything about it. Luckily, he has the power of the Chicago Tribune behind him, so he FOIA'd the incident, and then they said, oh, yeah, we did have some information on that. But, for those people like you and I who have done this in the past, typically we get no response.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, and I tell this usually, I like to people, I like to err on the side of giving them some leeway and just calling it incompetence. I know some people want to jump to conspiracy theory. Now they're covering it up, and it's like, but honestly, I'm saying this not necessarily from my previous experience with the government, but there's a lot of moving parts, and sometimes the people don't know where to look, or they ask the wrong person. So I'd say maybe they just didn't have that record that they talked about this. In fact, I just got a FOIA back today where I have proof that this flight existed and that there's radar tapes involved, and yet we got denied the FOIA request, and they said they can't find the flight. So you could say that's really suspicious, and maybe there's a cover up, or you could say, for whatever reason, they're not asking the right office, or they put in the wrong search term, and then they're very busy, so they move on. So, I mean, that's one problem here, and in filing these FOIAs. But this is a very interesting case. I think everyone remembers the Chicago case, and that there was these inconsistencies. Did they call the tower? Did they not? And what happened?
Right. Great point. And, he even said at the end that the United Airlines had not officially said that they had any knowledge of this incident. Well, a few years after the incident, there was some audio from the tower that came out. And in this audio, you can hear that they were aware. In fact, what we're going to hear is a United someone with United calling the tower to talk to them about it, and then the tower calling some of the United personnel to see if this actually was something that they had seen. So here's some great audio we'll listen to.
Tower, this is Dave.
Hey, Dave, it's Sue from United Tower.
Hey, Sue.
Hey, did you see a flying disc out by C-17?
Oh, it doesn't even start, Sue.
No,
You're seeing flying discs.
well, that's what the pilot and the ramp guys are telling us. The C-17, they saw some flying disc above it. We can't see
Come
above us.
on, Sue.
You didn't see it, right?
You guys been celebrating the holidays already over there, or what? You having a Christmas party today? I have not seen anything, Sue. And if I did, I wouldn't admit to it. No, I have not seen any flying disc at gate C-17. Unless you got a new aircraft you're bringing out today that we don't know about.
No.
No, I have not seen anything, Sue.
All right.
If I do, I don't know what I'll do. If I see, I guess I'll back it up with you, but no, I'll keep an eye out.
All right, bye.
All right, there. I heard Tower, Dwight.
Dwight,
Yes.
what happened to Dave? Did he have to take a break because I called him?
No.
This is Sue from United.
Yes.
Dude, there was a disc out there flying around.
There was a what?
A disc?
A disc? Can you hang on 1 second?
Sure, Dwight.
Okay, I'm sorry. What can I do for you now?
All right. I told Dave there was a disc flying outside above Charlie 17, and he thought it was pretty much high. But I'm not high and I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
Someone actually has a picture of it. So if you guys see it out there,
A disc? Like a frisbee?
like a UFO type thing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
They have a picture of it.
How high above Charlie 17?
Well, it was above our tower. So if you happen to see anything,
You know what? I'll keep a peeled eye for that.
all right.
Okay.
Thanks, bye. Gateway 5668.
5668, go ahead.
Yeah, look out your window. Do you see anything above United's concourse? They actually, believe it or not, they called us and said somebody observed a flying disc about 1,000 feet above the gate Charlie 17. You see anything over there?
Not that I can tell.
Okay. Yeah, I thought my job was stressful.
We saw it a half hour ago.
Who saw it?
A whole bunch of us over at the Charlie concourse.
Really? You guys did? Who's this?
The United taxi mechanics.
Yeah, so I love that, especially at the end. He's like, he kind of chuckles because he asked if the mechanic had seen it, if you couldn't hear, and the mechanic says, "No, nothing up there right now." And the guy's like chuckling and kind of nervous about it, and then he says, "But we saw it half an hour ago." And the tower guy's like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, a whole bunch of us saw it." So, certainly United personnel did see it. In fact, as Hilkovich, who is a Chicago Tribune writer, had spoken about, he actually spoke with United personnel, but they weren't able to talk publicly. So these are some of the topics that we're going to get into, and I think this highlights, the issue that people are having reporting. And, I guess let's start off with, why is this important?
Well, first of all, I just want to address the fact, the laughing and stuff like that. Like, it's easy to be really critical of them, but I think many of us would probably do the same thing because it's way out of the ordinary. But the fact that they're following up on it, I think, is important because, and I lived in Chicago for a while, and you're in what's called Class B or Bravo airspace, which is the busiest airports in the country. And for obvious reasons, you're a place like Chicago, and they were saying this thing was like 1,000 feet above their gate, right? That is well within the pattern. It usually goes up to 10,000 feet above ground level from the airport itself is the airspace they control. Any plane that's approaching, departing, if I remember in that case too, if one of the witnesses said it kind of as it took off, it punched a hole like through the clouds. So you have like this cloud base there, which also means you have, not perfect weather conditions. And anyone that's coming in on an instrument approach, you need to know any aircraft, any object that's in the way. So it's very important. You're carrying hundreds of passengers at any moment in one aircraft, and they take the job seriously. But when it comes to the topic of UFOs, like we did just here, that didn't really go anywhere after that. Like, oh, it's gone. Okay, whatever. Right. And it's kind of like our brain has this cognitive dissonance. It's like, well, it was strange then, but it didn't do anything to us. So what do I do with it? Where does the information go after that? And that's where I think the real problem is now, is we haven't had confirmed incidents of crashes, right, and collisions, although there are rumors of that. But what do we do with the information after? If we think let's call it a threat, if the threat's over now, do we just laugh about it and say it was strange? Or do we put that in a database and study it and perhaps try to do something and devise a better reaction to these things? There really is no like kind of a protocol. If you look at China, you remember way back, we addressed this. I gave it a lecture on it once. In China, I think it was 3 or 5 times, shut down their airports because of strange objects. And they later determined that one of them, they said, was a cloud. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know if that's more concerning. You don't know what a cloud looks like, or that you're having to shut down your airport, for something of that nature. But they seem to be more on top of it than we do. If I saw that in my airspace, I'd say, okay, no operations. We're shut down until we figure out what this is.
Right. And in the Chinese balloon incident that happened recently, I believe that they did shut down an airport, at least a gate, for that incident. But what's interesting too, with your point, as researchers, when I've called the FAA to find out more information, they record no data. They send me to a civilian kind of UFO reporting site, which is really strange, especially because, when I first started this, these were, the people I were talking to were former military. They were highly attuned to watching everything in their space, especially seeing if there's, anything problem with airspace. And, they were seeing things that they couldn't explain. So you would think that the FAA would be concerned, especially for air safety issues. So it seems really strange they would just send those reports away.
Well, let's talk about the Chinese weather balloon, or whatever it is, right?
Spy balloon.
Spy balloon. It's been seen tracked. They said about 60,000 feet. Okay, that's within our airspace. The radars see up at least to 60,000 feet, right? And that's considered class what we call echo airspace. That is where all the commercial flights and military, we all fly within that. There's not a plane I'm aware of that, I don't know, maybe the SR-71, something that goes over 60,000. Anyways, we own that airspace. So just look at this from a strictly national security point of view. If you don't have a robust reaction and protocol for responding to these things, suppose you are an adversary, okay? Suppose China did have bad intentions here. All you've done by not responding to this was a UAP. It's a UAP until you've identified what it is. If you don't respond to that, you've just told your enemies how to react and the gaps in the fence, how you're going to react. So the next time, and this is one of the things that the intel community is considering right now, this could be just sort of a probe, a test to see what we're going to do. And if they've done this, they say maybe 5 times we've had balloons. It's like if you just pass it off as I saw something strange, and that's how we treat our UAP reports, and it doesn't go up the food chain and nothing happens, then they know exactly where to go, where to fly, what time of day, and what to do to bring in something that could really cause damage to us. Mm-hmm. And that is, people don't see that paired up the same, but in a lot of ways, you have the same mission when it comes to defense.
Right. And what was also interesting to your point is there was a report that this renewed interest in observing UAP actually did help them in spotting this thing, whereas NORAD had admitted that several balloons had slipped through the cracks, that they hadn't seen it. So I think what we're seeing personally, seems to be this attention to UAP is helping in that matter. So it's helping, one, the defense side of things to be able to see, what China is sending our way. So we're paying more attention, but also in an air safety issue. So we're looking at these things that are in the air that could be air safety problems. And I would imagine, that's a big balloon. If it's at a lower altitude and something ran into it, I'm sure that could do some damage.
Oh, absolutely. If that started to descend or it really was uncontrollable and it started to come down, that's a big problem, and I think we may have addressed this before, but if you remember back in 1950, I guess it would have been about 52 or so, when they had the Robertson panel and they had all these, studies of, what should we do, and how should we react and whatever, the recommendations they gave back, what the whole hubbub about why they said that they were studying this and why they were worried about so many UFO reports was not because they necessarily were interested in the alien hypothesis. The reason they said was they were worried that our reporting systems would become flooded with UFO reports, and that would leave us vulnerable to a real foreign adversary attack from someone like Russia, specifically Russia. They could waltz in and we would just have this normalcy bias we call, like everything's fine. Yeah, it was weird, but whatever. Oh no, this time it was really Russia coming in knowing that we weren't going to do much with it because it's probably one of those weird UFOs, right? And so that is a problem, and why the DOD, at least from their perspective, it is a national security threat. Or in the last report, they said potential, but I think they're pretty well grounded now to say it is a threat.
I think that you bring up a great point here too, and it's something that I really hadn't thought about, but that was an overcorrection. So when the Robertson panel said, hey, we don't want our vital kind of reporting systems getting flooded with UAP reports, so they worked to make sure that didn't happen. By not reporting UAP, they kind of overcorrected. So then now people weren't reporting things like these balloons, and so they weren't getting vital intelligence on foreign technology, let alone the mysterious aspects of the UAP phenomenon.
Absolutely. The ridicule, the stigma, everything that still persists, a lot of that came from those policies that were put in place.
So let's get to some of the difficulties pilots have reporting. You'll notice, at the beginning of the audio, the tower is like, Sue, don't tell me that. It sounds like Sue has a great rapport with the tower, so she didn't feel so. She was laughing, of course, but she was willing to at least, get this issue to them. But you can imagine someone who doesn't have that sort of rapport, or maybe someone new, is not going to be wanting to call the tower and take some ridicule to tell them, hey, we've got some solid disk hanging out over our gate here.
Yeah, and this is always a problem because you have you have controllers who spend hours upon hours in very stressful jobs, and they're watching radar screens, they're dealing with potentially life and death things, and so they do get a different sense of humor. And like I said, we shouldn't judge them too harshly if they use humor. They're not necessarily ridiculing the people calling in, but pilots themselves don't want to be the butt of any joke either, right? And for people who don't know, it is a pilot's duty, and pretty much by the regs, they're required to report anything that could be a flight safety hazard. So if I'm flying through and all of a sudden I hit a patch of fog or turbulence I didn't expect, it's called a PIREP, a pilot initiated report. I'm supposed to call in and say, hey, I just hit some moderate turbulence here, or I saw some birds on the runway. So if you see an object that's not expected to be there and they're not telling you that you've got traffic up ahead, you are by law supposed to report that. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. So the pilot reports it doing their duty, but sometimes tongue in cheek, and they're like, I don't want to be made fun of, whatever. So a lot of them don't say anything at all. Okay. And when they do, a number of things could happen. Generally, I haven't really seen the companies come down on the pilots, the airline company, for reporting it to ATC. But heaven forbid if that pilot comes back and starts talking about it to the public, or even within their own company private internet forums. Okay, I have a pilot just recently, I won't name the airline because, again, they're worried about this. One of the pilots created a private group. It's not open to the public. He owns the website. It's not related to the airline in any way. Yet a group of pilots were flying into Seattle about December 16th, I think it was, or 18th. And about 20 of them witnessed what's similar to these racetrack UAPs that we were calling them, probably going to be satellites is the explanation, but very weird maneuvers and everything. And they called into Seattle. Well, they got back down and they started talking on this website between each other. And one of the guys gets called into the chief flight officer's office. He's like the head pilot over all the pilots. And we don't know the details of this, but he probably was called in under the pretext of, hey, what did you see? Well, he was warned, stop talking about this on social media if you want to advance in this company. And that, blows me away.
Yeah.
You're not identifying the company. You're talking with fellow pilots. It's not out on social media. And what is the problem about talking about what you saw? But
do you have an idea of what they're worried about? Why the airlines are so against this? The pilots talking about this sort of thing.
All I can think of about is this antiquated thinking that imagine the memes. Oh, come fly, airline X and see a UFO. Mm-hmm. Like they're afraid that's going to hurt their stakeholders, in the stocks of their company because someone's not going to fly them for seeing UFO, or that their pilots are crazy. I mean, come on. The majority of people already believe, that the UFOs, unidentified objects, exist, or that we've been visited. And I think we're beyond that people aren't going to choose their airline, based on the people who don't report, the pilots who don't report UFOs. Come on. Mm-hmm. So I think it's silly, but the only thing I'll give them credit for is I get it. If you don't want your pilots filming things from the cockpit and putting that on social media saying, I work for, this airline, and because they don't want the passengers to feel like that's what they're doing in the cockpit is, some of them laugh and say things, and as they're filming, it's really weird. they don't want them to be spokespersons for the airline company. I get that, but they should be able to talk about it. They should be able to remove an airline name or to talk about it and to share videos and make reports without associating the airline.
And it seems like the personnel know very well not to speak about it. I mean, for example, the Chicago O'Hare incident happened in 2006. In that audio, Hilkovich had mentioned that, pilots, personnel at the gate. We heard them call the mechanics. The mechanics said they had seen it. He said a bunch of us had seen it. When Sue called in to the tower the second time, she said there was a photo and a picture that was taken. Yeah. And none of that has been released. Not one witness has come forward from United.
We never found out who took that photo.
No, it's never been discovered. I know some researchers in the area who researched that for many years. Maybe we'll have them on the show later on. But and none of that has ever come out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you pick up the pieces, and some people don't give it up. The people who are really ardent, researchers and doing a great job, they're the only ones picking up the trail. I love that the news station followed up on it, because that rarely happens. So why don't we talk briefly about what happens on the FAA side, though? Just, I don't want to geek out totally for people who aren't into this policy stuff, but what happens is, so I'm a pilot, and I observe something that either is a safety hazard, to my flight, or I do something stupid. So, for example, or even the air traffic controller, if they don't maintain a safety standard, for example, they let two planes get too close to each other in the air, or in the ground, or I didn't listen to an instruction and I entered the runway when the tower didn't tell me I was cleared. Then what happens is they create what's called an MOR, a mandatory occurrence report. That's like, it's like when you're in school and you get a check mark on the board, right? You get written up. There's not necessarily any fines, but something could happen to you for recurring training or suspension, or depending on the severity of it. Well, UAP reports, my experience has been, rarely is a mandatory occurrence report made. That does fall under the regulation if an aircraft fails to identify. If they fail to answer communications, or they don't know what this aircraft or craft is, they're supposed to make an MOR. Now the MOR, from what I understand, can go higher up the food chain. They could follow up. They could do an investigation if they can find the culprit. But in the case of a UAP, rarely ever. I have not had one of the pilots I've ever interviewed had the FAA call them personally on their own, proactively the FAA calling them. If you remember Mark Holsey, who was the F-18 pilot who started the whole thing, back in August of last year when I started reporting on that, he called them because a controller gave him a phone number, said, you might want to call these guys. If it wasn't for that, I don't think any of the higher ups would have called the pilots for more information. So what happens is, you're flying along, you see something, you're supposed to call in to whatever control facility you're talking to. You make a report, they take the information, and the controllers that I've talked to have not received any feedback on, for example, this latest stuff we're calling the racetrack UAPs. If these are satellites, the FAA has not given any memos to them and given, they can send out a various, reports, memos, updates, whatever, when they get their briefings for the controllers. Nobody has received any type of summary or possible explanation for what these are. And so they don't know what to tell the pilots. There's also something that you'll see in the news called a NOTAM. And it's called a notice to airmen. I think they call it notice to air mission now. And these, it was 2 weeks ago, where we had pretty much the whole country had been shut down for a couple of hours from air traffic. That was because of the NOTAMs that are supposed to go out about everything from, hey, we have military activity over here, we have to close this airspace. You've got, like the president traveling from here to here, whatever. These NOTAMs go out anytime somebody flies. They're supposed to look up the NOTAMs in their area to see if there's anything important. Well, the system was not working because some contractor had some corrupt bug or something they put in the thing. And so it shut it down and no one can fly. Okay, well, the NOTAM system, because of that, it has to be revised. It's old. They're trying to fix it. But the pilots should be, in my opinion, notified about significant UFO, UAP reports in their area through the NOTAMs as well. And yet nothing has been sent out. Nothing has been told to pilots, hey, if you see something that kind of looks like this, we believe it's a satellite or SpaceX told us it is, blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole lot going on here. The main frustration I'm hearing about is that pilots and controllers feel like they're left in the dark. They feel like they don't have a process to report. And like you had mentioned, back in the day, it was Bigelow Aerospace that had the contract. It's actually written in the regs to contact Bigelow. They had like the phone number. They're supposed to make the report to them. Now it actually says contact organizations such as the National UFO Reporting Center. And we all love Peter Davenport. We all love the work and stuff that they're doing over there. But it's a database that, unfortunately, there's not really a mechanism within kicking that information back up to the FAA unless the FAA requests it.
Right.
There's nothing that says, here's the call to action now. What do you do about it? It's a database that collects for researchers so they can go look things up. And
even at that, it's one guy filling out what's akin to an Excel spreadsheet and fitting the summary of the event into a very few words. So very little data and not much you can even follow up on. Not that anybody is following up on it, but I want to move to kind of where we go from here. I think there is some good news on the horizon. So it wasn't too long ago that it was announced that NASA had, part of their panel to look into UAP, brought in some agencies, the FAA being one of them, Enigma. We were there as well. We had people present. Mm-hmm. And, it looks like the FAA is looking for solutions, so they are addressing this. I think that we can take what the military, the Pentagon has done, especially the Navy, as a success story. So now that they're out saying, hey, trying to get rid of that stigma, we want to hear these UAP reports, they're receiving them. The latest report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence on UAP that came out just a few weeks ago said they had received many more reports. Of those reports, the number that they cannot resolve, that remain unidentified, grows. So, there's more concern in that they have more cases that aren't identified as well. So hopefully, I'm very hopeful that FAA and others are seeing that and are going to put in place solutions to take this more seriously. But of course, it takes time to roll something out like that.
It's a federal government. It does take time. I will say on that note of being positive here, I did have information that one of these recent occurrences of these, circling lights, the controllers use what's called the DEN, the Domestic Event Network, and it's basically a 24/7 open hotline where all of the air traffic controllers are supposed to be monitoring. So it happened after 9/11, and they established this. Well, they used the DEN for one of these latest UAP things, and they put out the alert. Within minutes, we believe that headquarters, calls up asking for more information. So now it does seem that they're collecting information either for the task force or through JTOC, the Joint Air Operations, center that collects information. So there's more of an interest, which is awesome. And I would love to see some policies. We'll talk about it another time, but something that protects civilian pilots from having repercussions from their company. We got to get beyond this, allow them to talk and make reports freely. It's fine if you don't want them to say what airline they work for, but they need to be able to, if not the government, to private research. They need to be able to make those reports and to not feel stigmatized or worse, lose their jobs over something this silly.
Right. And there is a lot of traction, I believe, in the Pentagon side and with Congress with these reports from the pilots, the Navy pilots, where their concern is flight safety. They're like, very literally, and Ryan Graves is one of those jet fighter pilots who had experiences. And he says he's literally afraid for the lives of himself and his colleagues when, things like this are zipping by, which, some of his colleagues had experienced. And the UK and a couple other governments, I think even the Canadian government has a board that looks over, part of their kind of FAA that looks over near misses. And they take UAP reports, and many of the UAP reports we've seen over the years from those countries come from these databases. Is there something similar in the US, or have you ever heard of near misses happening here where, there have been people raising security concerns?
Yeah. I mean, I typically hear more from the military. The military people tell me I was on an exercise and flying a Harrier, and this thing, came up in between our formation and followed us or zipped by the other direction. Civilian wise, I still have some reports that I will be releasing hopefully in the next couple of weeks with a little bit of video of objects, that were pretty much in the path of the aircraft. And so, yeah, these things happen. And the mechanism here is supposed to be the MOR, and you file that. And if it was the controller's fault because they knew something was there and they didn't keep you separated, that would instigate it. But also the pilot could report it themselves and say, hey, this thing zipped by me. And it probably happens a lot more than the public realizes. Because they either you keep quiet about it, or that there's no official investigation opened.
So, of course, another solution, talking about databases and reporting, is what we're doing here at Enigma. And, we've talked about this, how you're sending your reports our way. And we do take reports anonymously for those who are concerned about their careers. And we do ask specifically if people are pilots, because for one, to get to researchers like you, but also because those are great cases. Because as we talked about on the last show, a little bit on this one, pilots are great observers because they're spending so much time up in the sky looking around. What other solutions do you think there might be? Really, I think hearing their reports, taking them seriously, researching them, having them not be afraid of losing their jobs, and then hopefully over time, the stigma going away. That seems to be the formula that's been working for the military, and will hopefully also work on the commercial side.
Yeah, all of that is great. And also, because you'd mentioned, the stigma, if we can remove that and come to some balance between, what the companies want and their policies versus the need to gather information, I think we could find. A lot of people say, well, why don't these pilots have, I have a dash cam in my car. Why don't they have cameras all over? Well, there's the cost, there's this, there's that. And the fact that too, not a whole lot of cameras can film low light with all the different things you got going in the cockpit. You don't want to clutter things, but if we could find a solution, we are testing some cameras that hopefully we could have something like that where it would be not too much in their visibility to put it up there. If there's an event, it kind of maybe be a voluntary program at first, but to be able to hit record and then to have that to be able to analyze afterwards, because they do spend so much time up there in the air. And if these things are being seen more frequently, then we can more quickly come to the conclusion that it's explainable or not.
Yeah, it's all really actually very exciting because I mean, and I would love to hear your thoughts, but it does, and you've kind of spoken to this a little bit, but it does seem like everything's getting ramped up. It doesn't seem like the military's going to slow down in their collection of reports or in their attempt to destigmatize this situation. It's something they're committed to. Of course, we'd love for them to share more data with us. So hopefully that will be happening in the future. But regardless, I really have a positive outlook just seeing FAA in those meetings with NASA. NASA also one of their things they're tasked for is air safety. So that is a realm that they're interested in. So hopefully through that route, they'll also be taking this situation more seriously. And there will be a lot more investigation and research, and we'll be finding out more. It seems like that's inevitable, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And we hope that it doesn't, kind of fizzle out like, when they said they were interested in this with Project Blue Book and then the Condon report and everything. And it's not like the problem was ever resolved. You know, if this has been going on for 70 plus years, maybe hundreds of years, it's always going to be here. There's always going to be something. There should be an office that we stand up, continuously, not just because we have pressure from Congress or the public, every couple of decades to do something about it. And then they let it go away. Well, people aren't complaining anymore, so it's okay. We're going to move on to other things. No, we should always have an office and agencies that do this. Mm-hmm. Because have we come any closer to solving out what these things are, solving them? Have we come any closer? I mean, publicly, do we know any more, over the past 70 years than we did back then? Mm-hmm. I would argue there's a good case that the public probably doesn't know a whole lot more than they used to. So we should always have this, and it's really important we don't lose that enthusiasm. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on these two shows. I'll put a link below. We've got a special link for Ben if you want to take him to get those reports to him. But of course, there's the link below. Please do report any sightings to us. Right now, we are gathering those. We are slowly bringing more people into our beta tests. And, if you do report, we will be in touch with you. So do please report your sightings so we can begin to figure this stuff out.
You guys I got a great response from, we get dozens and dozens of reports every week. So keep sharing that link. If you use the one that has, the / Ben Hansen on it, it comes to me directly and I can review the reports in your videos. And like Alejandro said, it can be anonymous or not. The more information we have, the better picture we have of what's going on. So thanks for your support.
That's what this show is all about, is sightings. So sharing with you various sightings. One of the things that we're doing, of course, we have a knowledge base on the website where we're posting articles on sightings that are well-researched, neutral, unbiased, to examine many of the most important cases out there. And we're adding cases there all of the time. So we'll be reviewing those cases on the show. And we are getting a lot of reports right now. So we're examining the reports that we're receiving, and we'll be sharing some of those reports with you in the near future as well. Some of them include videos, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some witnesses on so you can hear firsthand their take on what they experienced. So it's an exciting time for this topic. So join us for the ride as we discover more about the UAP phenomena. Thank you very much.